Today is August 22nd, 2025. I am Gabriele Fellows with the Museums of Lake County, and this is an oral history interview with Dee Parker. Dee, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
So to get started, what can you tell us about your name? Were you named after anyone?
No, my name was chosen because my mother and my grandmother did not like the name that my father chose for me. He wanted me to have the name Delight, and they didn't like the name Delight, so somewhere or other they picked out Dolores.
And what is your date of birth and how old are you?
My date of birth is August 23rd, 1930. So tomorrow I will be 95 years old.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And where were you born and raised?
I was born in the hospital in Healdsburg, California, and I was raised at my grandparents' house in Geyserville.
And what were your parents' names and what were your grandparents' names?
My mother was Rowena Evelyn Rose, and my father was Clint Nelson Ames. My grandmother was Eva Parkerson Rose, and my grandfather was John Rose.
And do you have any siblings?
No, only child.
Who is the oldest ancestor you know about?
Well, I have information on my grandmother Eva Rose's family that goes way, way, way back.
And what do you know about her?
My daughter-in-law, Cheyenne Parker, did a ancestry search, and if I go back to all the mothers, if I don't mess around with the fathers and going back, the mothers go back to 1663. And the mother in 1663 had a son. Let me get my notes. The son in 1663 was Edward Spalding, and the ancestry thing said that he applied for a membership in the U.S. Sons of the American Revolution in September of 1663. I understand some people came from England on that side of the family. My grandfather's side of the family, his father and his father's brother escaped from Germany. My grandfather was born in 1880, so they probably escaped from Germany sometime a little before that, and my guess is that his father was born probably 20 years before him, which would be 1860. They didn't exactly say why they escaped from Germany, but I know that when they came to the United States, that's when they picked up the name Rose. There's no record that anybody could find about what name they had before they left Germany, but when they got to the United States, they chose the name Rose.
And describe the neighborhood or community you grew up in.
I grew up on a farm a mile north of Geyserville. We had 26 acres. We had a winery. We had grapes and prunes that we were raising, and my grandfather was making wine. He would buy grapes from the neighbors and the other people that were raising grapes, and he would make wine and sell it. They built their beautiful, beautiful home in probably 1925, 1927, and then along came Prohibition, along came the Depression, and they lost everything. So the winery was gone. They had to sell part of the prunes. They tried to make wine again, I guess it was in 34, but the Prohibition, the government basically said, pay the taxes on the wine, and then a little later they said, just pour the wine out on the ground. And my grandfather was a very law-abiding citizen, and he did what the government said to do. So then they had no money, and they were, just trying to get along. Of course, in those years, nobody had any money, and we had hobos walking up and down the road, and occasionally we would be giving them sandwiches when they knocked at the door. So, it wasn't just my grandparents that didn't have the money. Nobody did.
And what did your father do for a living?
My father, in 1930, when I was born, he and my mother were living in Berkeley. And I don't know what the job was that he had, but everybody was losing their jobs. And so he was out of work, and he and my mother decided to split up. And so they took me to my grandparents to raise. I was 6 months old when I went to live with my grandparents. My father found a job in Los Angeles to drive the dairy truck for Safeway. And this was a long, long time ago. And he wanted my mother and I to go with him because he was going to have a job down there. And my grandmother was very insistent that no, her daughter was not going to live as far away as Los Angeles. And they certainly weren't taking me down there. So they never got back together. He drove a dairy truck for Safeway until he retired. But, he was in Southern California all the time with that. Of course, there was the time he was in the Army, during the Second World War, when everybody was in the Army. So that's basically what he did.
Did your mom work outside the home?
She had, some of the times in her life, she had a library, and I believe it was her own library. Sometimes she would have a library in the corner of a department store like the Emporium in Santa Rosa. She lived in Santa Rosa for quite a while and would come to visit us in Geyserville. But then she moved back to the Bay Area.
And what did your grandparents do for a living?
Well, they had the farm. And in those days, you had a farm, a winery, or whatever, and that was what you did. After there wasn't any money, my grand and I had started school. My grandmother started taking in boarders, school teachers. They would come and live in our house, and she would fix their lunches and fix their breakfast and dinner. So there was a time the Baha'i group had a camp in Geyserville, And some of the time she would fix meals for them. So she enjoyed cooking.
And tell me about your grandparents. Tell me some more about them.
Well, he was quite quiet. He loved being outside and he liked to garden. He actually made himself a tray house. When you have prunes, you, after you pick them, you put them on trays. Well, first of all, you put them through a lye wash, and then you put them on trays and put them out on the out in the open sun to dry. And so that was part of what he did for a living. But he also enjoyed gardening, and so we always had food out in the garden. So, you know, he started out as a cooper in the winery, which at that point was called Geyser Peak Winery. And then apparently they got married, and they bought the property across the street from the winery. Now this probably was about 1920 maybe. And they had lived in another older house, but they built an absolutely gorgeous house. Just had everything in it you'd ever want in 1926. Beautiful plate glass stuff and mahogany wooding. It was a very big house for its time. And her brother was the contractor for that house. This was when they had money. He had been a cooper. He built tanks. And then they built the winery also. So, you know, he had a winery going as well as the fruit stuff. Did I answer that correctly?
Yes. And what are some of your earliest childhood memories?
Well, I was the only kid on this 28-acre place, 26-acre place. So, you know, I had cats, I had dogs, I had a black-faced sheep, which I was very close to. Those are basically my childhood memories, and one of them was when the black-faced sheep that I was so close to ended up for dinner. So, you know, that's what happens when you're living on a farm and get, you know, accustomed to the chickens. And you know, we had pigs, we had a horse. I did not ride the horse. My grandmother was very stern about all things. And one thing is, you do not ride a horse. They're very dangerous. And when I was in high school, and the senior ditch day or whatever it was, there were horses there, and what the heck, I'm rebellious, I'll ride the horse. And sure enough, I got on the horse, and the horse went along so far and then stopped at a fence, and I just went right on over the fence. So my grandmother proved right to stay away from horses.
And what stories have been passed down in your family?
Stories? I don't know. The fact that my grandmother had lived in Dutcha Creek, which is between, it's kind of west of Asti, and Asti's between Geyserville and Cloverdale. And she had 6 brothers and her family was clearing a piece of property over there, and the property went from wherever their house was that they were living in down to the creek. And on the other side of the creek, the Indians lived. And they were all pretty terrified that the Indians might not like them being there. So, and the boys of her family, the brothers, were all out clearing the property for whatever they were going to do with the property. And they were clearing it of a lot of poison oak. And then, of course, the boys brought in the clothes, and she, being the oldest girl, she got to wash the boys' clothes. And she was very allergic to poison oak, so she had a lot of poison oak. That kind of a story.
And did you have a best friend as a kid?
I had several friends. Going to Geyserville High School, there were like 50 people, 50 kids in the whole high school. So you knew everybody, and you knew everybody very well. And you'd been in this town all these years, and we all knew each other well. But there was a girl, Patty Dominichelli, lived down the street. My high school class had 16 in it, and at graduation time. And the girl down the road a bit was Patty. And so, we were friends. We weren't together all the time. It was like, there's somebody down the road. We both got on the same school bus. So.
And did you have any hobbies as a child?
No, I basically liked to be outside. I liked to swing, we had a big swing under the oak tree by the house. And I seemed to spend a lot of time in the swing. I had paper dolls. I don't know if they do paper dolls these days. I was explaining to you trays. And we got off to the prunes and how you do the prunes. The trays, the reason I wanted to tell you this, because it was under things about my grandfather. He liked to be outside. And we had this great big beautiful house, but he still liked to be outside. And the trays you put the prunes on are like about 3 feet wide, and they're probably 6 to 8 feet long. And he made a bedroom out of those trays under a persimmon tree. He slept out there year round. I don't ever remember him sleeping in the house. He always slept out under the persimmon tree. He had a wood floor and those trays.
Why do you think he did that?
I think he liked it outside. The other thing he did, he wore long underwear. And he wore long underwear 365 days a year. I don't care how hot it was, how cold it was, he wore long underwear. He also would not take any showers or baths in the house. We had a humongous basement, and he had a shower in the basement, and that's where he wanted to shower. And so all his showers. But the long underwear, comes all the way down to your wrist, all the way down to your ankles, and that's the way he liked to be. And here was this great big beautiful house, but he came in it to eat.
What schools did you attend?
What?
What schools did you attend?
Geyserville Elementary and Geyserville High School.
And what was your favorite subject in school?
Maybe history.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
Well, one of the favorite teachers Mrs. Preston was a favorite teacher in high school. Cleora Ritz was my typing teacher. But in elementary school, it was probably Mrs. Cunningham.
And what do you like about her?
I don't know, but she and Cleora both lived with us because my grandmother had taken in teachers to board. And so I got to know them really well.
And did you play an instrument in school?
I played clarinet and I played flute. And I also had piano lessons, none of which I did very well, I'm sure.
And how has the world changed since you were young?
Well, let's see. These little iPhones, with phones, we had a desk in the hallway, and it had a phone that was round at the bottom, and a stem came up, and it had a little speaker here. And over here was a box, and you rang the box if you wanted the operator. Now, you could take your cell phone and hit a person's name, and the number comes up, and all of a sudden they're there. There's another place I'm not really too good at, but if you go to the Google something or other, you can ask them for a phone number. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to learn that stuff.
And did you have any goals or dreams for when you grow up?
No. I don't think I ever thought much in if you want to, in those years, girls got married and had families. And now, girls think in terms of what their profession is going to be. And they certainly don't think about getting married. So.
Did you go to college?
No. Well, I didn't go to college, but I went to business school, which I was supposed to go there for, 2 years to be able to be a secretary or something or other. And I did go for probably a week. And what I realized was they were teaching me what I had already learned in high school in a business class. I already knew how to do shorthand. I already knew how to type. And so instead of finishing business school, I just got a job because that's what they wanted on the job. So, later, after my husband finished college, I was supposed to go to college. And I think I signed up. And I decided, no, I don't want to go to college. I would rather have a family. I had been with him through all of his college, so I knew what the classes were that he had done. So I didn't want to be wasting my time.
Tell me about your husband, Welden. How did you meet him?
Well, I was in 8th grade, and he was a freshman in high school. I lived in Geyserville, and he lived in Healdsburg. And one day at the Geyserville Elementary School, a couple of my friends and I were sort of out in the play yard, and Welden had just gotten his driver's license, and he had a friend named Frank who used to go to school in Geyserville, and they were trying to figure out where to go. And Frank said, I know some girls at Geyserville, so let's drive up to Geyserville. So they drove up to the school and parked out in front, and we saw Frank, and so we went out to the car, and we were standing by the car visiting, the other two girls and I, and all of a sudden, one of the girls said, oh, here comes Dee's grandmother. We better get out of here. You guys had better go. My grandmother was extremely strict. She did not want me around any boys for sure. And so they left, and that was how we met.
And how many years were you married?
68.
Tell me a little bit more about Welden.
Well, if you want more about how we met, again, I was a Rainbow Girl, and he was a Dee Malay, which is part of the Masonic, it's the kids' part of the Masonic Lodge. We were having a joint installation, the Rainbow and the Dee Malays, and after the installation, they had a dance, and I was dancing with somebody else, and he wanted to dance with me, and they had big candles they used in the installation, and the guys would take a candle and come over and whop the guy on the head if they wanted his partner. And so Welden popped the guy on the head that I was dancing with, and I danced with Welden. And shortly after that, we went steady, and I probably was a freshman or a sophomore in high school, and we went together all the way through high school, and he went off to college, and well, I should also tell you, his family was very poor, and there were 7 kids. And he needed to go to college because he wasn't terribly healthy, and the doctor had encouraged him to not be doing what the family was doing. The family were very hard workers. They were basically migrant farm workers from the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. I've skipped away ahead of wherever. So in my high school, I was working in the office, and I found a letter that said you could apply for a PTA scholarship. I didn't want a scholarship, but I knew he needed one, so I took the letter and I took it down to him and I said, you need to apply for this. And he said, okay, I'll do that. He had never been to a town that had a college campus. You know, he didn't know anything about, in those days, what you would do to go to college to be a teacher. He knew he wanted to be a teacher. So he was supposed to write a letter and as to why he wanted to do this. And I kept saying, did you write that letter? Did you send that letter in? You know, the deadline is coming up. You need to write that letter, you know. Eventually, it was sort of the last day that he could do it, and he looked around the house. He couldn't find a nice piece of paper to do it on, so he just had the lined paper stuff. Couldn't find a pen. He used a pencil, and he wrote a nice letter about why he needed a scholarship, and he won. And so he was then going to be off to college. Well, the family certainly couldn't send a kid to San Jose State. You know, that's 150 miles. And somebody that they knew had gone to San Jose State and knew of a boarding house. So he got a job cooking in the boarding house the first 2 years. And then we got married and I was working, so, you know, he didn't have to cook in the boarding house anymore. So I don't know if you want to know about his growing up.
Sure.
Okay. He was born in 1930 in Corpus Christi, Texas, and the family moved from there to Oklahoma. They were sharecroppers, which means you're working somebody else's property and you get a little bit of money for it. He was the third of 7 children. There were 2 older boys, and then there were 2 girls, and then there were 2 littler boys. I don't think the 2 little boys had been born, but times were pretty bad, and there was, the Dust Bowl came, so all of their sharecropping stuff didn't work because you couldn't grow anything in Oklahoma at that point. So his grandfather lived in California, and he said, if I send $50 to his father, to Welden's father, can you bring the family to California? And then I think you could find work. So he sent $50, and there were cousins that wanted to come with him in the car to California. So the story went on about how many tires they had to change. They had the mattresses on the top. They were the Okies. They were the Grapes of Wrath people. And so they came to California. Well, when you get to California, you're starting in like the immigrants do. Which jobs can you do? This is during the Depression. What jobs are available? And they camped. And they did this until he was in junior high. They camped up and down the state. They worked the prunes, the grapes, the cotton. They used to rake leaf mold. This family of migrant farm workers. And then, of course, the war was going on, along with the Depression and the Prohibition. And when Welden was in 7th grade, his dad got a job in Vallejo making submarines, and they were able to have a job without moving all these places. And so they got a house that actually had a bathroom and electricity. This was the first time when he was in 7th grade that they got those things. He had gone to 11 different elementary schools with all of this moving around.
Wow.
It was the one place in his life that he felt really secure, apparently, and that's why he wanted to be a teacher. So
after he graduated college, where did he teach and what grades did he teach?
Well, he taught in Santa Clara the first year, and he taught 6th grade. He also taught there the 2nd year, and then they wanted him to go, well, they talked about him being, his strong subjects were science and mathematics. They wanted him to do something with the science stuff in Santa Clara County, but he also got an offer of a job in Stockton, in San Joaquin County to set up a science schedule as to how the teachers should be teaching science, so that the teachers, and also start a junior museum, which was a museum of live animals that they could take out to the school classes. The teachers would borrow those things. He did that. We were there, I think, about 3 years. And he was asked to teach a summer school at San Jose State, and he really enjoyed that. Well, in order to be doing those things, he needed to get a master's degree. So back to school. And then he decided he wanted to teach at San Jose State University, and so was back to school. So this migrant farm working kid ended up with a doctorate from Stanford. But, you know, there was a lot of years in there.
And at what age did he retire?
He retired at 52. He had taught 30 years, which made him eligible for retirement. And we had a whole lot of other things that we thought we'd like to do. And so he retired, and we started trying to do the things that we wanted to do.
Now talk about the jobs that you've had throughout your life.
I did a lot of strange things. As a kid, I cut pears, I picked prunes, I picked hops. I went into the wine tanks and chipped cream of tartar off of the inside of the wine tanks. After high school, I got a job at a hardware company as a secretary, one of those things that had pipes and faucets for sale and that sort of thing. I didn't stay there very long. I think I was there probably about 8 or 9 months, and then we got married, and so I moved to San Jose. When I first moved to San Jose, we got married and moved to San Jose, it was working in the cannery was the big thing. And so I was on one of those lines where you put 2 peaches in this can and the next can goes by and you put 2 peaches in that can. Welden was working there, and being he had some college, he wore a white apron and outfit and went around testing for bugs in the tomato cans and, you know, that kind of stuff. Then it was time for him to go back to school, and I got a job at the Merchants Association in San Jose, and I did things like greeting people when they came in the door to find out who they wanted to see. And some of the time I could be a switchboard operator, so I would, you know, you take this cord from here and you put it in that hole up there, and this cord from here and you put it over there so these 2 people could talk. That's how the switchboards worked in 1950, which was a long time ago. I basically became a wife and a mother that was raising kids at that time. And then occasionally we would have a little need for a little extra money. This was before he retired. And I would work at the Emporium in the sweater department at times when maybe he would be home and in the evening, and I would run in for a little part-time job. When my daughter was ready to retire, one job I had was kind of interesting. When you pay your car registration to DMV, now you might pay it with your credit card, you might pay it by mailing in a check. In those years, 1950, 52, you went down to the motor vehicles and there was an outside window and I was at the window and you came and you gave me money for your car registration. And I did that several years, you know, for a couple of months during that. When my daughter was ready to graduate from high school, I decided I really needed to have something outside of the home so that she couldn't be calling me every 2 minutes to take her somewhere. And I got my real estate license and I sold real estate for several years.
Oh, okay.
Which was great fun.
What was that like?
Oh, it was so neat to take a couple that didn't have much money but needed to get into a home and figure a way and an area where they could go to live that they could find a home. Those were unbelievable years because look at the prices now. They're unbelievable. I could get somebody into a house that cost maybe $30,000.
Wow.
A nice house.
Wow.
Well, in 1953, we bought and my husband was just out of college. We bought a house in Santa Clara, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a garage, nice backyard for $9,000.
Whoa.
You know, when I was selling houses, you know, they maybe were 30,000, maybe they were 60,000, but you know, they've gone really nuts at this point. But so has a piece of lumber if you go to buy it. You know, there's something about inflation that doesn't seem to go in the other direction. It did in the 30s, but not anymore.
So tell me a little bit about your son and daughter and some memories of them when they were children.
Well, John was always very quick to pick up on things, learned things fast, very confident in what he was doing, and very responsible. My daughter, Kathy, was very slow. I think she was born too fast, so I think she had some damage when she was born. So John learned all the things you're supposed to at the right time. I do remember a few instances where he was just so absolutely kid. When I would go in to talk to the 5th grade teacher about what he was doing, she would look up at the ceiling and she'd say, "See that beam up there? See those spitballs up there? John was one of the ones that was putting the spitballs up there." So John would occasionally do these wonderful, exciting things that the teachers didn't like. But he was very responsible, and we did a lot of camping. And we were at Lassen Park one time, and I think he was about 8 or 10 years old. And we were all going to go on a hike, a ranger hike to the top of the mountain that was scheduled for one day. And Kathy was a little slow on doing those things because she's 2 years younger and she had problems. And my husband didn't quite feel like going. He seemed to not be having a good day that day. And John, at 9 or 10, we had great confidence that he could go with the ranger and the group up there. And he did, you know. He did just fine because he was a very responsible kid with a head on his shoulders. Kathy was very slow. She didn't learn to walk till she was about 3, and she didn't learn to talk until she was about that age. At this point, you know, she's 70 years old. She does have, she never could learn to drive, and she does have caregivers. She was married for 45 years. She has her own home. She knows how to use her iPad to Zoom with people and do things like that. She is a square dancer. She does lots and lots of things. She has a membership in a handicapped pool where she goes every day for exercise classes and things. So, John was in the band at school, and then he decided to go on to college. He went to Sonoma State. I think he spent some time at Davis. Graduated from Sonoma State, and then he got his doctorate from Los Angeles. Oh dear, UCLA. And he's been very active here in Lake County. You want me to talk about kids? One of the things that John did, he was very active in high school in the band, and very talented in musical stuff. But the boys had a in the garage get together things, and you know, my garage sometimes, somebody else's garage, and he played the drums. And he took his grandmother's fur coat and cut it up this way and that way, and actually covered his set of drums with this fur coat that she was getting rid of. So he is probably the only one that had a fur-covered set of drums. So.
Do you have any grandchildren?
I have one granddaughter, and she lives in Alabama.
What's her name and what does she do for a living?
Amber. She travels for one of those organizations, I think, that handles insurance for big groups, businesses. I think that's what she does. And she will travel to Hawaii and hold programs for this group of people. And then she'll be in Washington holding workshops. But I think she works with the people that, I can't think of the name of what it's the people that handle the employees' insurance and paperwork kind of stuff.
Do you have any great-grandchildren?
I did have. I had a great-grandson, and he decided life wasn't all that wonderful, so I don't have a great-grandson any longer. So
So tell me, when did you move to Lake County and why?
Well, I came here as a little girl. My family would come up and camp on Cache Creek. Oh, I don't know. I maybe was 8 years old. The other place that we would go, my grandparents and I came in the rumble seat of a car to Blue Lakes. There's two Blue Lakes. There's the clear one on the west side and the other lower Blue Lake on this side. Well, at the west end of lower Blue Lake, there was a place called Camp Inez. And we would come over the Hopland Grade, and I'm in the rumble seat of the car, and we would go there and camp. This was 1910, no, 1939, 1940. I was 9 and 10 years old, and I actually learned to swim on Blue Lake when I was about 10. It was an interesting campground. It was called Camp Inez, and there was a dance floor, and they used to do beer barrel polka quite regularly. And there were lots of people that were German there, and they were all speaking German. And there was a slide from the dance hall down into the lake.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
The place is nothing now, that area, when you drive by, it's nothing but a bunch of berries and brambles and trees. It doesn't look like there ever was anything there, because the campgrounds now are on the other Blue Lake. Well, anyway, we used to go there when I was 9 and 10. And then, on December 11th of 41, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, all of that stopped. We did go back to that campground the next year. There were no Germans there, and you would never ever hear anybody speak German after 41. So, so that we stopped going, obviously. And years later, my husband and I and the kids would go to Camp Inez, or Camp, what's the other one at the other end?
Trianon.
La Trianon, yeah. Okay, my husband's family used to come on Cache Creek to camp also. Well, after we'd been married and had the kids, we would come up to Clear Lake just for Mother's Day weekend or Easter weekend or those sorts of weekends. So I've been coming here basically my whole life. And we would camp on the lake. And when we had a boat, we had our boat, and we would come up and we'd try to go out on the lake. And one time it was so windy. This was now we're to 1975 or so. It's really windy on the lake, and we couldn't tie our boat down enough for it to stay put, and we surely couldn't go out. So we took a ride one day to find a place where we could put the boat so we could come up on weekends, because we're living in San Jose. And we happened to go down Harbor Lane and found this house with a for sale sign on it. And so I had, I was selling real estate at that point, and I had a thing with, if I really liked a house and nobody else bought it, well, maybe I'm supposed to. And so the next time we came up, nobody had bought the house, so we bought it. But that was in '76.
So tell me about the different clubs, nonprofits, groups, and organizations you've been a part of while living in Lake County.
Well, to begin with, when we first moved up here, we were weekenders, and when we bought the house on the creek, John was going to Sonoma State, and it was a weekend house for us, but John moved in so that he could live there and then drive to Sonoma State. And at that point, he found how many cultural sites there were across the creek from our house. And so he became very interested in trying to save that 1,000 acres, which has become Anderson Marsh State Park. And so he was living there. And he organized a group called the Cultural Heritage Council, which we became a very big part of in trying to work with him to, he had an environmental group, a Native American group, and a historical and wildlife group, and they were all the Cultural Heritage Council, and so we were a big part of that, working to help him to save Anderson Marsh. We've been part of the land trust for many, many, many years. In fact, I found a paper clipping from the land trust with Barbara and Les in it, and the four of us were sitting at one of their annual dinners, and this was, oh my goodness, many, many years ago. And the Historical Society we've been part of for a long time. It's kind of just as members, not any officers or anything like that. So those are three of the main groups that I've been quite interested in.
And talk about your involvement with the Eli Stage Stop Museum and the creation of Anderson Marsh.
Well, John sort of drags us into these things. You know, he finds how important they are and starts working on them, and then we kind of sort of tagged along and tried to help. Eli, the Historical Society, there were two ladies years ago that did a lot of work with the Historical Society. One of them's name was Wanda, and now at this point I can't remember the other ones. And they were very active in it. And then when the group, the Historical Society group, realized some of the stuff that was going to do, I think Beckstoffer, who has vineyards over there, had the old stage stop house on his property, and he wanted to have it gone because he wanted to do something, I think, with that part of the property. So the Historical Society figured out how to move it to this other piece of property where Eli is now. And in doing that, they fixed up the old stage stop house as a museum, and then the property that's on it, they built a barn to keep the wagons. And then along came the fiddlers, and the fiddlers wanted to have a place to have their fiddle music, and Eli invited them. And so now every Sunday, the first Sunday of every month, the fiddlers are there playing, and we have a group of, I don't know, 70 or so people that regularly come over there, and they also have hot dogs and pie and hamburgers. So it's a very nice Sunday afternoon thing to do, the first Sunday of the month. They receive a lot of donations from county people, and recently a lady from Buckingham gave them 16 old coaches, and they are now in the process of trying to raise money to build a barn to keep these coaches in, because they're quite beautiful. So, you know, I sort of know what's going on there. I try to keep involved, but I'm not on the board or anything like that. For the state park, John organized the Cultural Heritage Council, and they did a lot of work to get the state and people to know what was there. You know, one developer wanted to build 1,000 houses in what is now Anderson Marsh. Another developer wanted to make a business park there. And the Army Corps of Engineers wanted to build a channel through the whole thing to empty Clear Lake faster. John worked very hard to get all of this arranged so that it could be a state park. He went to Sacramento and talked to legislators who just happened to be able to sort of move the thing forward. So I think it was in 1982 or 83 when we had the opening for Anderson Marsh. And it's unbelievable the amount of work that was done to get that park by people here in the county. But John was basically leading them, so I'm very, very proud of what he has done for that, and now what he's doing for the museum stuff.
So talk a little bit about Les and Barbara Parker.
Oh, I met them at one of the Cultural Heritage Council breakfasts, another thing that John was in charge of. They were having breakfasts to raise money at, I think it was the Methodist Church in town in Clear Lake. And we walked in, and John thought, well, my parents don't know anybody here, and I'll sit, and my parents are kind of friendly, so he would sit us with this other couple that were there for breakfast that didn't seem to have anybody that they were with. And so it was Les and Barbara Parker. And we sat down, and we had interests in the lake, and we had interests, and we had boats, and they lived on the lake, and we lived on the creek, and so we suggested that maybe when they're out in their boat, they could come by our place. And they did. And then they liked where we lived, and their place had 210 steps down to the water, and they used to say 560 back up to the house because it's hot going back up the steps to the house. They were over in Jago Bay. So they bought a house on our street. And we went to church together. We played cards together. They we were going to Florida regularly, and they came down to Florida to visit us. And then we decided we'd buy a place in Florida, a trailer, and they went in with us, and so we lived together in Florida for part of the year sometimes. So they were very, very good friends. And while we were doing all this with them, he was very busy working on rebuilding this Lower Lake Schoolhouse Museum. So they had lots and lots of community good service things that they did.
Tell me about all the notable times you've been on the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, well, I lived in San Jose, and our relatives were up here. This is after I was old enough and married and in San Jose. I've been back and forth that bridge many, many, many times. But the first time I was on the bridge was, I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. Well, it was in 1937. So I was 7. And my aunt and my mother took advantage of the fact that there was a day you could walk on the bridge before the traffic was going on the bridge. So the day before the traffic was allowed on the bridge, we walked on the bridge. So, and that just was just absolutely wonderful. Then I've been driving across the bridge many, many times. On December 7th of 1941, my grandparents and I were in Oakland and San Francisco visiting family, because my mother lived down there and my aunt and uncle lived down there. And we came out of a restaurant, and everybody was in a state of shock because the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And so, okay, we were going back to Geyserville that evening, and we got in the car and went up to the Golden Gate Bridge. We used to cross the ferry from Sausalito to San Rafael before that bridge was there. But anyway, this time we were going on the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was dark, and the lights on the bridge went out. And that was a real shock, because if you're going across the bridge and they have all these lights, strung up all over the place, for the lights to go out was really shocking. It wasn't the lights on the car, it was the lights on the bridge. And they went out because they were afraid the Japanese planes were coming over to the bridge, and if they turned out the lights, the Japanese planes wouldn't see the bridge. So that was a very memorable time. I kept, I drive across it all the time. I really want to walk on it again. You're driving and you see these people walking. I want to walk on the bridge. And I kept saying, I want to walk on the bridge. Anybody want to go walk on the bridge with me? No, nobody. Why would you want to walk on the bridge? Well, I was 91, and I'm still trying to walk on the darn bridge. And I got tired of asking people. I got tired of no. So one day, I woke up and I was listening to the weather report, and it was going to be a beautiful day in San Francisco. So I thought, okay, today's the day. I'm going to go walk on the bridge. And so I got out of bed and got ready, and I got in the car. I drove to Middletown, and I thought, at 91, you shouldn't be driving off somewhere and nobody knows where you went, because they need to know where to look for you if you all of a sudden have a problem. So in Middletown, I called my neighbors and I called my son and I said, I'm headed for San Francisco and I'm walking on the bridge and I'm in Middletown. Oh my goodness. Why are you doing that? You shouldn't go alone. Well, hey, I asked you and you wouldn't go. So anyway, I went down. The hardest part was finding a place to park, because in Lake County, you don't have a problem finding a place to park usually. But for the parking lot for the bridge, that is a problem. First of all, you're going south. The parking lot is on the other side of the bridge. So you got to go around under the bridge and up to the parking lot. And the parking lots are all full. And so you drive around, and finally you just drive around waiting for somebody to leave, because you're not going to find a place unless somebody's leaving. Then I couldn't find the path for walkers to go to get to the bridge. And I ended up, well, and then you got to do this thing with the parking. You're supposed to put your credit card in a machine and tell them how long you're going to be there, and then you're supposed to get a tag out and go put it on your car. Well, then I couldn't find the path to the bridge, but I finally found it. And it went through some bunkers that were put there to defend the bridge, either that or before the bridge, to defend the Golden Gate. Anyway, I walked through that bunch of bunkers and I finally got to the bridge. And I was just so excited to get to the bridge. And then, of course, I talked to people so they'd take my picture. And then I found this one couple that actually had gray hair. And so I stopped and I said, you noticed everybody on this bridge is young. Well, you know, to get there and to walk on it, you better be young. So anyway, and some of the people I asked if they knew about December 7th, and they had no idea, you know. There's not a lot of people that know what December 7th was. And back to Les and Barbara Parker, he was in Hawaii on December 7th.
Oh.
And he was a diver, and he dove into those ships after they were on the bottom. So he had lots of stories about Pearl Harbor.
So tell me about your love of square dancing and fishing.
Ooh, two great things. I would love to go do both of them right now. We started square dancing when Welden was in college the first time, when we were, I don't know, about 20. And we square danced. We took a little time off when our kids were growing up, but then when about the time John was in high school, we took square dancing up again and have been square dancing. We've square danced in 48 states. We've square danced in China. We've square danced in Turkey and Greece.
Wow.
Do-si-do is the same whether in China or Greece. You know, I square danced last March And hopefully in December I will square dance again. So it's a wonderful exercise. There's wonderful, wonderful people that are square dancing, and Barbara and Les were square dancers. My husband taught them how to dance. He was a caller some of the time. It's just a wonderful activity.
Tell me about your love of fishing.
I fished my whole married life. I love fishing in the ocean. I like fishing in the lake, although I don't seem to be doing either of it very much anymore. I went fishing out of Fort Bragg probably about 2 years ago, and one of my claims to fame is catching a 32-pound salmon in the Santa Cruz area, just a little bit off of the harbor down there. So, but we did some commercial fishing out of Crescent City for a while. So I love the ocean fishing. But
And tell me about all the traveling you've done and how you and your husband traveled the rivers of the United States.
okay, he retired at 52 after 30 years of teaching. And we loved boats, we loved rivers, and we loved traveling. And so we bought a 26-foot cabin cruiser. We bought it over around Stockton. And so we went up the Petaluma River to Petaluma. We went over in the Delta, and we fixed it so we could live on it. If you don't mind cramped living. And we had bicycles for our transportation. And anyway, we traveled around here, and then he loved to write, and he wanted to write books. That this was his idea of retirement. He was going to retire from teaching, and then he was going to write books, and I guess he thought we were going to sell books too. Our first river trip, we decided we should do the biggest one first. So we towed the boat to Minneapolis and put it in the Mississippi and lived on the Mississippi in the boat all the way down to the Gulf. We even went out beyond New Orleans to, there's an island out there about 20 miles further out. And I think we spent probably about 3 months on that trip, and we eventually wrote and published a book, The Magical Mississippi. And then we had 5,000 books, and then you got to figure out how you're going to sell 5,000 books. So we went up and down the Mississippi in the car, contacting places where you could sell books. Then we did the Tennessee River, and we did the Cumberland River, and we did the Ohio River, and then we took our boat down to Florida, and he wrote another book about the rivers of Florida, and we did the St. John and the Withlacoochee, and all kinds of rivers around Florida. So, and then we kind of got worn out, I think, or aged out. So we brought the boat back home and sold it.
Oh, okay.
So we only got the one book published, The Rivers of Florida is in a box. It's a manuscript form that he kept saying, I'm going to rewrite parts of it. And so we would haul it back and forth from Florida. And he rewrote some of it. Of course, with all of the writing, somebody gets to type. And this was before computers. So, you know, typewriting for hours and hours and hours on end takes up a lot of time. You might have been fishing or doing something else. And I was the typist.
So tell me about the different countries you visited.
Oh my. We started, you know, we loved traveling. When we were first married, it would take us 3 weeks to travel up to the Oregon border, because we had to stop and see everything along the way, and I swear he needed to stop and fish in every stream that was along the way also. Then as time went on, we were traveling around the United States, and we have been to every corner of the United States, traveling usually in our car. Sometime about the time he retired, the square dance group was having a trip to China. Our caller was teaching Chinese people how to call square dancing. And so we spent 2 or 3 weeks with a group in China, square dancing. And then another trip to Egypt on a square dance thing. And that was 2 or 3 weeks in Egypt. We've been to Turkey and to Russia. We've just been lots and lots of places. We had a European trip, which was quite memorable. He was teaching, and he took a sabbatical. And we bought a VW camper that you pick up in Austria. And we spent about 3 months camping from Scotland and Norway all the way down to Spain and over to I lost it. Dubrovnik and Portugal. He was doing some sort of a math program introduction to the army schools in Europe. Anyway, after we did all of that, Kathy was with us, and she was about 20 years old. After we did all that, we came back, and they shipped the car back to the VW back to us. It was a VW pop-top that you used as a camper. So, you know, we camped all over in it. Another time he had a class to teach, a science class in Saipan. And so we went to Saipan for a couple of weeks for this special class he was teaching. We've had cruises around South America, around the Horn. You should come to my house. I have things from everywhere, all over the place.
So what kinds of hobbies do you have right now? How do you spend your time?
I have tomato vines and cucumber vines, and I have sweet peas that I need to pull out because they're getting in the roses. I'm picking figs. That's basically how I'm spending time. Tomorrow I am going to Sacramento to a play.
What kind of play?
We go to Theater in the Round in Sacramento, and we've seen things like In the Heights, and tomorrow we're seeing Hair. And in Sacramento, we buy another lady and I go, we buy the season tickets for the Theater in the Round, and that's 6 tickets 6 plays you get to go see during the summer. One of them we saw this summer was Hello, Dolly. So,
What kinds of card games do you like to play?
I have a group that comes by every Wednesday, and we play Hand and Foot, which is a canasta type game. And played it for years with Les and Barbara, played it for years with other friends. Now I'm playing it for years with this group. John and Cheyenne and Belle and I also often play Hand and Foot.
So what are some of your greatest accomplishments?
I do not think I have any accomplishments other than that my daughter reads and my son is able to do all the stuff he's able to do. I won't say that that's my accomplishment, but if he wasn't my son, these things wouldn't have gotten done.
How would you describe your personality?
I think I'm very outgoing.
And what would you describe as the best day of your life?
There have been many, many. I don't think I could focus in on any best day.
And what is something you wish you could do but you haven't done yet?
Well, for years I've been saying I really wanted to go to Africa on a safari. But you know what? At this age, it's probably not a good idea. So, but I always thought, you know, we've been so many places and done so many interesting things. I think that's one I'm just not going to get to.
And what's the best advice you could give future generations?
Well, I would really like for people to be able to know their neighbors and the people around them and appreciate them. I find today with the phones and the stuff that you do by yourself, you don't need to go out and meet somebody and get acquainted and realize who they are and what you can offer them and what they can offer you. You know, we need to be able to get physically closer than have all of our stuff just fed to us on these little machines.
What do you think the world will be like in 50 years?
50 years ago, when I was 40, I had no clue what the world would really be like now that I'm 90. So it was not imaginable 50 years ago. There's no way you could imagine what it's going to be like in 50 years. Do you like that answer?
What haven't I asked you that you'd like others to know about you?
I'm happy with my situation. I'm happy with my health. If God wants to extend me an invitation, I'm ready to accept it. Is that what it, does that answer your question?
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today and for sharing your stories.
Okay, thank you for having me. I hope what I have is a slightly interesting thing for somebody to see. That is the house I was raised in Geyserville. It's a mile north of Geyserville. And those are my grandparents, Eva and John Rose, who owned the house at that time. And I was given to them when I was 6 months old to raise. In 1927, they had lots of money. They built the house. Everything in the house was the finest. They had bevel glasses on their china cabinet. They had mahogany, I think it was Philippine mahogany, on the walls. It was a very beautiful place. It's still there. The last I knew, it was owned by the Coppola Winery.
Oh, okay.
It's a mile north of Geyserville. This is kind of an interesting one. This is at the Healdsburg Bridge, and we are competing in a barrel race. This may be me here.
Oh, okay.
You got on the barrel and you had to race from here down to wherever, and I didn't win. But I did do it. This is digging clams at Dillon's Beach. You know how you dig clams?
How?
Well, their little neck sticks up like this out of the sand, and as you're walking along on the sand, it retracts its neck. So you know that's where you dig.
Oh.
You're digging in mud. And you dig and you dig and you dig, and then pretty soon you lay down on your stomach in the mud, and somebody's holding on to the neck of the clam, and you keep digging and digging. Those clams are like this deep. This is a wedding picture from June 4th, 1950, and this is the 60th anniversary. No, it's the 50th anniversary at the Brick Hall here in Lower Lake that we had a huge party for.
What year did you get married?
1930. No, fix me. 1950. That's the church where we were married. So this one has my father-in-law, Art Parker, my grandmother, Eva Rose, my mother-in-law, Lena Parker, me and Welden, my mother Rowena Bruce, and my grandfather John Rose, and my stepfather Bill Bruce. Well, the young man is Carlton, my husband's little brother. John was I can't remember John's name at the moment. Wesley, Keith, and this is Meryl's husband, and I've forgotten his name.
What about the bridesmaids?
Okay, you have Meryl and Barbara and Delois and Diane and Alberta.
Okay.
And Sharon. And this is the group, Barbara Glazier and my cousin Diane and Alberta and me and Welden and Meryl and my sister-in-law, Dee, and my niece, Sharon, at the bottom. This is our wedding photo at my grandmother's house after the wedding. And you have on the left my father-in-law, Welden's father, and his wife, Art and Lena, and of course the wedding cake, and Welden and I. And then you have my mother and my grandfather and my stepfather in this picture. This is our honeymoon.
Where'd you go?
Any place that was cheap. We found a place in Los Gatos. It was a little old motel. And then we headed out. We were going to go to Los Angeles because my dad and stepmother lived down there. I had absolutely no relationship with my father. He and my mother gave me to my grandparents when I was 6 months old. And they were living in Berkeley, and he couldn't find a job. It was the recession. He found a job in Los Angeles driving a truck for Safeway. And so he wanted my mom to go with him. And she had since moved in with her folks. And she was thinking about going. And my grandmother said, no, you're not going with him. And so she just turned around and went back upstairs. She was very dominated by my grandmother. She obviously needed her. My grandmother would drive to Berkeley, this is in 1930, to pick up the washing, to come up and do it for her. So, anyway, I had no relationship with my dad, except I did see him once when I was 4. I think I saw him again when I was 9, and he went off to war. Anyway, so on our honeymoon, we decided we would go south. And we got down in that area, went to the bank where we had some money, we thought. The bank didn't extend that far south, so we were down there really without any money for gas or food.
Oh no.
So we went to see my dad, and we got to stay overnight there. And then the next day we drove back up to my husband's grandparents, I think, and we stopped there. Anyway, this is the honeymoon.
Okay.
This is me working on my degree of PhD, putting my husband through. I was working at the Merchants Association in San Jose as a secretary and part-time switchboard operator.
Did you go to college?
No.
Okay.
The big plan was I would work. I would work and he would go to school. And this had been our plan all through high school. And so as soon as I got out of high school, that was what I did. And then we got married a year later and moved to San Jose, and I worked so that he could go to school. Well, when he got out of school, I was supposed to go to school. I think I attended 1 or 2 classes. And to go to college, you have to start with the basic stuff. Well, I'd been with him with all of his classes. I really didn't want to start with the basic stuff, so I thought it'd be much better to start a family. So we started our family, and I became a mother instead of a putting husband through, you know. And I never, except when people say, oh, I got my degree in such and such. Well, I got my PhD degree, and it worked well for me. So anyway, when I belonged to Faculty Wives, because he was on the faculty of San Jose State, being I had had the experience of working while my husband was going to school, they asked me to be in charge of the group of girls that are putting their husbands through school.
Oh, okay.
So that was what I was doing. We started a junior museum in Stockton. My husband he got his teaching credentials and he taught in Santa Clara for a couple of years. And then they hired him as a county school person to start a junior museum in Stockton.
Oh, okay.
So we moved to Stockton, and we had a museum that had live animals.
Oh.
And so we ended up with a skunk. We would have foxes and different things that we would bring home to take care of that needed to be a little older. And this, we're preparing for a bazaar at the Congregational Church in Campbell. And that was many years ago.
Okay.
Everything was many years ago. This is our VW camper that we bought in San Francisco, picked it up in Austria, and we camped all the way from Scotland and Sweden, all the way down to Egypt. Kathy's riding a camel. She went with us on that trip. And when we came home, John met us. He and his wife and the baby were staying at the house. So this is our first look at our great-grandchild. That is the salmon that I caught in the Santa Cruz Harbor many, many, many years ago, and it was about 32 pounds. And later we heard it was the biggest salmon caught in Santa Cruz.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Did you eat it?
Of course. Actually, that was on a Saturday. And the next day we went to church, and we took the salmon to church with us, and we put it on one of those big carts that they bring the coffee out to impress everybody with the salmon.
Cool.
Weldon and I, in our square dance clothes, at a square dance somewhere.
How many years did you square dance?
I square danced until last April when I left Florida, and I started square dancing in San Jose when I was about 19.
How'd you learn how to square dance?
Well, you go to a class, and they teach you, and then the steps are the same whether you went to the class in 1951 or you went to the class in 1994 or when you went to the class in 2024. You know, you learn the left allemande and right and left grand, and you just still do that.
Okay.
And a lot more.
And it's you and your husband?
Yes, we must be on a cruise where it's cold.
How many cruises have you taken in your life?
Oh, heavens. Too many to count. And I'm still not through. And that's Weldon and I on our pontoon boat, which we spent many, 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 many times on in the lake. And right now it's under my house. And another Christmas card from 1998. We had won the Community Award for our outdoor resorts community. It's kind of a good neighbor award that's given once a year. That's my husband and I, and we're in Egypt, and we're riding the camels. And we're in front of the pyramid. We were with a group of square dancers, and we actually square danced in the upper chamber of that pyramid close to the esophaguses. This is Hastings, Minnesota. When we were trying to sell our books, we took the books to all of the marinas and all the gift shops and bookstores, along the Mississippi to try to sell the 5,000 books that we had printed.
What was the name of the book?
Magical Mississippi. And we spent a lot of time doing that.
Did you sell all the copies?
No.
Oh.
No. We used to go to the snow for a few days every winter so we could play in the snow.
Oh.
And that's on one of those trips, me and the toboggan. That's in the snow on one of those trips with Welden and John and me and Kathy. On the left upper is my husband with two of our neighbors who were about to take him out to lunch because the girls were going to go to the Red Hatters. The second one was John and Cheyenne, and they were getting their Emmy Award for the film Walk Through Time. Welden and I were eating at Luca's restaurant, and it was a very special place for us because when we were in high school, we used to go over and fish on the docks there and catch little tiny fish. Over here is me in my new kayak, and I'm still using the kayak. And this is daughter Kathy and Ted. I took John and Cheyenne to 11 Roses for a tour for their birthdays.
What's 11 Roses?
11 Roses is a big piece of property, sort of out of the Oaks off of 20.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of the name of the road that goes out there, and it's a well-known road, and it's probably 11 miles out that road. And in the spring, they have beautiful wildflower tours.
Oh, okay.
And they also offer lunch and music. And so we went out and went on the tour. And that was one of the trees that was on the tour. And this is Kathy alone at her Christmas tree because Ted has passed.
Okay.
That is at a family reunion. And you have my granddaughter on the left, Amber, and Cheyenne, my daughter-in-law, John, my son-in-law, Ted, and my daughter, Kathy, and Welden and I are the seated ones. John and Cheyenne have made wine from our grapes several times, and this is one of the times when they're bottling the wine.
Oh, okay, I see now. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. They're putting the cork in the bottle.
Where are the grapes grown?
On my deck.
Oh, okay.
But now I don't get any because the raccoons beat me to it. My son John brought home from Georgia an antique, I had it in my head a minute ago, a mill to grind sorghum. So he grew sorghum, and then you push the stalks of the sorghum in that hole, and you're supposed to be a horse, but we didn't have a horse, so Cheyenne and I pushed the log round and round and round and round, and it grinds up the sorghum stalks, and so you make sorghum that way. This is my neighbor, Dee Parker, who I'm sure you've heard of Carl Parker. Mm-hmm. And they lived on our street before they moved away, and I. This is Barbara and Les Parker. Somewhere around 1980, we were here, and they lived over in Jago Bay, and we didn't know them. We went to the Methodist church downtown because John and the Anderson Marsh interpretive group, which was not called that at the moment, they were putting on a fundraising breakfast. And when we went in, John thought, there's a lot of people in here. Where shall I set my mother and dad? And he decided to set us with these other people that didn't seem to know anybody, because then we could get acquainted. So we told them where we lived, down in Highlands Harbor. And they had a boat, so they came over in their boat to see where we lived. Oh my gosh, they loved our neighborhood. So they bought the house 2 down from us.
Oh.
And we became best friends. They came to visit us at our place in Florida and fell in love with our place in Florida. And then they decided, well, there was a place for sale. We thought about buying it, but we really couldn't afford it. So the 4 of us went together and bought the place in Florida. It's a trailer, in a trailer park kind of thing. We bought that together. We spent like 6 months together at this place in Florida. We bought a boat together. We fished together. They learned to square dance, so we square danced together. We were just bestest of friends. And I knew when they were here working on all of this stuff.
Do you know how they originally got involved with the museum?
Well, both of them were very community-minded, and they went to the Lower Lake Methodist Church. And so they were there with Tom, and all of this was going on, and they just volunteered for all kinds of things.
Oh, okay.
And very, very into the Cultural Heritage Council, which ended up getting Anderson Marsh.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just the most wonderful people to get involved and do things. I don't know if you know this, but he was in Hawaii with the attack, the Pearl Harbor attack.
Oh.
And he was a deep sea diver. So he worked on those ships that were underground, underwater.
Oh, okay.
And he had unbelievable memories of all that. Deep hatred for how all of that was bombed and what happened. And we were there, we were in Pearl Harbor with them years later. He was very, very upset as to how the Japanese people would actually come there as tourists and be on the boats over what they had bombed. To him, it was very upsetting.
Yeah.
Which, it was, and I was on the Golden Gate Bridge the day that they bombed Pearl Harbor. As I've told you, that the lights going out on the bridge was just amazing. So